Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We actually had a server issue with our Eventry platform, so we had to, while they were trying to rectify that, we decided to go on and get on a Zoom meeting. So thank you so much for your patience, for finding us. We're gonna have a great session this morning, and we hope by 10:15 we will have all the issues resolved and we'll be able to continue with the Eventry platform. If that doesn't work, we'll make sure we get message to you, and we are recording this session. All right, thank you so much. So hello to our Age Inspired, Age Reinvigorated conference participants. Hope you had a wonderful day yesterday, being inspired and reinvigorated. What a day yesterday. A panel with octogenarians, an Alzheimer's update from Dr. Jaika. We had Hungry for Change, culinary medicine talk with Dr. Graham. We had posters and breakout sessions. And this morning we had the Allie's chair exercise. And this session will not disappoint you. My name is Pam Yankeelev, and I'm the Director of Research at the University of Louisville Traeger Institute. Before we jump into day 2 of our conference, I just want to remind you that you don't have to wait an entire year to continue your education and your commitment to the best practices and policies related to optimal aging. All you have to do is join the University of Louisville Traeger Institute once a month for our Project ECHO on the care of older adults. Project ECHO is a telementoring platform that brings together a group of interdisciplinary healthcare professionals, social service providers, and students to learn about the state-of-the-art practices that help our patients, our clients, community members, and us optimally age. This year, we're focused on the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. We begin each session with a didactic, then one of our partners presents a complicated case in which all of the person's biological, psychological, and social aspects of health are discussed, and we work together in a transdisciplinary space to consider ways to help this person optimally age within the context of what matters most to that person. Then we ponder how we can take what we've learned to communities in our Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities discussion. Remember, it doesn't matter where you live because Project ECHO is virtual. We would love for you to be a part of this learning community. And if you have an interest, please email me. Now let's welcome our special guests. First, we are thankful to Jessica Elkin, who is representing the Kentuckiana Regional Planning and Development Agency. KIPTA is a significant supporter of the Optimal Aging Conference in many ways. Jessica.
Thank you, Pam. Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining us for this virtual Optimal Aging Conference, and welcome to everyone. Your commitments to joining us virtually today is truly appreciated. I am Jessica Elkin. I am the Division of Social Services Director at the KIPTA Area Agency on Aging and Independent Living. What is a KIPTA, you might ask? As an area agency on aging and independent living, well, when you love something, you take good care of it. That's what KIPTA does for the community. Dedication to community service lies at the core of all that we do. In partnership with the Kentucky Department for Aging and Independent Living, KIPTA works with community providers such as the Traeger Institute to implement supportive service programs for older adults, those with disabilities, caregivers, grandparents, and many others, assuring that they age optimally in place in their home and communities. We have services such as senior nutrition or Meals on Wheels, caregiver services, grandparent support, senior centers, health promotion activities, and Medicaid waiver services, as well as in-home services, and many, many more. KIPTA also provides community planning services as they relate to aging optimally in place. As we join this conference today virtually, it is a reminder of what we have experienced in the last 2+ years with the COVID-19 pandemic. In-person meetings, visits, etc. were all placed on hold. But I believe we turned COVID-19 into an opportunity rather than an uncertainty. One thing I've shared with staff, providers, and anyone else who would listen to my voice is that when the world stood still, we all stood up. Everyone jumped into action. Unprecedented crises present opportunities, and together we have set the precedent for responding to the absolutely unprecedented. Services transformed and continue to be provided in record numbers. We are so proud to be a part of this amazing, truly amazing network of dedicated community providers. And as you join us today, we do our best when we do it together. So this conference is a great step in assuring we continue heading in the right direction to forge synergy between all of us for the one goal that we all want to achieve: providing supports for optimal aging. Together we have done a lot, and together we will continue. We are so happy to be able to partner and support this conference, but most grateful for the opportunity to be in the presence of all of you. I look forward to hearing your discussions and learning from your insights. Opportunity, optimism, optimal aging. Let's get into it.
Thanks so much, Jessica. We so appreciate your support. We have another valuable sponsor that we'd like to share with you. They're not able to be with us here in person, but we do want to share a little information about who they are. Today's Transition is a print and online resource to help older adults live an exceptional, intentional second half of life. They interview community members and professionals to talk about everything from finding their passion to making their best snack. They inspire ideas about living your best life right now. Today's Transition is a connection to help older adults transition to different phases of their life. You can read about how people are changing the way they work and volunteer to get inspiration or search different ways of living on their website. Today's Transition is a community that strives to offer easy to navigate, comprehensive health and caregiving directories to help you help yourself or others. Search online for caregiver communities, health solutions, and home health care. Currently, their directories cover Kentucky, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. Right, we thank Today's Transition. Now I have the honor of introducing Dr. Robert Friedland. Dr. Friedland is a clinical and research cognitive neurologist devoted to the study of brain disorders associated with aging. He is a graduate of the City College of New York and the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. He worked in the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory of the University of California, Berkeley. From 1985 to 1990, he was the Deputy Clinical Director and Chief of the Section on Brain Aging and Dementia of the National Institute on Health, or NIH. At Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, he was Chief of the Laboratory of Neurogeriatrics and the Professor of Neurology, Psychiatry, and Radiology from 1990 to 2008. In 2008, he joined the faculty of the University of Louisville as Rudd Chair and Professor of Neurology. His work is focused on clinical and biological issues in Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, with collaborators in the USA, UK, and Japan. In November of 2020, he completed a one-year sabbatical leave at the Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine with the support of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, studying the influence of bacterial amyloid on the development of ALS and transgenic Drosophila. He has authored and co-authored over 230 papers, which has been cited over 15,000 times. In October of 2022, his book, Unaging, The 4 Factors That Impact Your Aging, will be published by Cambridge University Press. So we hope we get a few copies signed by you, Dr. Friedland. All right, so we are ready to hear from Dr. Robert Friedland. Thank you so much. Send your questions in the chat as Dr. Friedland. We will answer them at the end. See,
Dr. Friedland is unmuted.
Dr. Friedland, if you could just go on and unmute. There
Now, how is that?
Wonderful. You are ready.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm pleased to talk to you about my view that aging can be seen as an opportunity, and it is a special opportunity which can be appreciated depending on our attitude. And I'm pleased to acknowledge the contribution of my collaborators at the University of Louisville and others in Japan and Cambridge. And I'm grateful to my nurses who have had valuable discussions about the concepts I'm going to be presenting. And I'm grateful as well for the foundations and agencies that have supported our research. more details about the concepts I'm presenting will be available in my book, which will be published in October, on aging, the 4 factors that impact how you age. I'd like to refocus how we think about aging, to reframe our understanding. Imagine these 2 cases. First is a 94-year-old man who said, when I asked him what is his main problem, he said, I have Alzheimer's because I can't remember who wrote the red and the black. And of course, after I examined him and found that his functional capacity was excellent for 94, I told him that failure to remember Stendhal, this French novelist, is not a sign of dementia. That we must understand that the brain ages just like every other part of the body. He wouldn't expect his heart to work as well as at 94 as it did when he was 49, and he shouldn't expect that of his brain. And secondly, a 65-year-old man I saw who had a motorcycle T-shirt, and I asked him if he wore a helmet, and he said no. I said, why not? He said, because when you're going to go, you're going to go. This is actually a very widespread problem, not only with motorcycle riders, but people have unhealthy behaviors throughout life, and they think that it's okay because when you're going to go, you're going to go, that there's nothing you can do about it. And the actual truth about aging is there are a lot of things. And I'd like to talk about how our understanding of our attitude about aging, that there are things you can do. And similarly, that it's important to recognize what it is that happens with aging. So I'll talk first about what aging does to our performance and why it matters. Why does it matter what we do? And I'll present the theory for multiple reserves. We all know about cognitive reserve nowadays, but I will present the concept that there are multiple reserves involving cognitive function, as well as physical, psychological, and social reserves that influence our opportunity to gain from aging. And then, of course, what can we do about it? Most importantly, we must understand that we don't want to age normally, because most people have high blood pressure. Most people over 65 say they do not have excellent or very good health. Most people over 65 have more than 2 chronic medical conditions. And many people over 85, of course, have the need for assistance with everyday activities. So our goal should not be normal aging. We should make good choices so we can achieve optimal or exceptional aging, as of course is the focus of the Traeger Institute. So if you look at function here in regard to the ability to work, the ability for kidney function, nerve conduction, these things decline. So it's generally true that almost everything, every function in the body will decline with age. But what needs to be recognized is what's shown here, that while function declines, the variability is always increasing. So if you look here at maximal walking speed, younger people over here and older people over here. Younger people are more like each other. Older people are less like each other. People are less like each other when they get older. There is more difference in an older than a younger population. And what this means is, while the average performance is declining with the black line, there are many people up here whose function remains relatively intact. because the variability is increasing with aging. So it is possible to have aging with relatively small losses of function. The important concept here is what was originally proposed by Claude Bernard, the French physiologist, who was a friend of Louis Pasteur. He proposed the milieu interior, the stability of the internal environment is a condition for a free and independent life. And this involves the brain as well as other organs, which was called homeostasis by Walter Cannon. All the processes responsible for managing and adjusting the activities of the body. Healthy aging requires us to maintain this stability. This is the key fact about aging, that the stability is more fragile as you get older, and our ability to withstand stressors, which develop with age in everyone, depends on our resilience or reserve capacities. And we can do something to enhance these reserve capacities. This is represented best, I think, by the word salutogenesis. We have the word pathogenesis, which is the development and maintenance of disease. But we also have this magnificent word salutogenesis, which is the origin and maintenance of health, coming from the Latin term salute, like salud, which is a greeting in Spanish to your health. So the maintenance of health is an active process. Health is not just the absence of disease. And this is characterized by the interdependence of our brain with other organs, as well as the interaction of ourselves with others, which is the key to health and fitness. So actually, the book that I spoke about earlier, I originally wanted to call it The Declaration of Interdependence, because of the importance of this concept of interdependence. The American poet James Lowell said, "There is no good in arguing with the inevitable. The only argument available with an east wind is to put on your overcoat." This idea helped me understand the concept about aging. Is aging inevitable? He says, if it is inevitable, you can't argue about it. I think that the fact that aging is not inevitable helps us to understand that we can argue about it. That is, we don't have to accept the declines with aging and the difficulties associated with aging, because there's something we can do, because aging is not inevitable. Many people have said aging is an inevitable part of life. But I point out that of all persons born 65 years ago, 14% of them have already died. So for these 14%, survival to reach the age of 65 or greater didn't happen. Everyone knows people who didn't live long enough to have an opportunity to be old. So I disagree with the concept. And I think because aging is not inevitable, it can be understood as an opportunity to do things which will enhance the function and happiness associated with aging. Of course, there are many examples of this. If you think aging is inevitable, how would you explain that to Princess Diana, who died when she was 36? So there are two ideas here. Not only aging is inevitable because it doesn't happen to everyone, but also the declines in aging are not inevitable. We're all one day older today than we were yesterday, but we're not all one day older tomorrow than we are today, because as everybody knows, survival from one day to the next is not guaranteed. Everyone doesn't get a chance to be old. And aging is often seen as synonymous with decline, and that's not correct. So a 60-year-old man who drinks too much, is overweight, and does not exercise and smokes, if he did the right thing about these dangerous behaviors, at the age of 70, his cardiac function could be better. He could have more muscle mass, and he could have a better performance in regard to walking and playing golf or whatever it is he wants to do. And there are things we can do to enhance this opportunity. We have to work against discrimination because there's a long-standing, widely held view that aging just has negative effects. And this is not correct. Remarkably, the great physician Osler said that the effective, moving, vitalizing work of the world is done between the ages of 25 and 40, and then it was all over from there. But he was wrong. Charles Darwin wrote this great book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, when he was 72. And there are many, of course, many other examples of this. So the main concept here is because aging is not inevitable, it's an opportunity. So then if it is, what are our goals? What goals should everyone have about getting old? And this is not limited to older persons, but younger persons as well. I think the first two goals here are rather obvious. First, yes,
Friday.
First goal would be.
See, that's just it. All next week, I've got 4:30s all the way across the board.
I'm sorry, someone needs to mute their phone.
We can do. So I'm trying to get in the homes next week too.
Hello, can that be muted? The first goal is not dying. We want to live from one day to the next. Our second goal is not having disease. These two are rather obvious. We don't want to have cancer, heart disease, and so on. I think many people will limit their goals to these first two things. But a third is equally important, is being fit, enhancing and maintaining our function, which I would define or illustrate as having strong cognitive, physical, psychological, and social reserves. So our resilience is enhanced. So a person, let's say at 70, who obviously has survived to be 70, if they don't have heart disease or cancer and other notable disease processes, disease conditions, that's good, but it's not enough. They should be concerned with having the highest level of function, because there will be challenges to their survival as they get older. And the ability to do well despite those challenges depends on this third goal of fitness. In regard to our second case discussed earlier, who said, when you're going to go, you're going to go, he implied it didn't matter what he does. He thought, bad things would happen and they're going to happen. But that's not right. And we can understand this best considering several facts. One is, we're not designed by evolution for great life, long life. Because older persons don't have children. And their influence on their children may already be largely over. So that what's critical for evolution is the survival of our genes. And when our children have lived long enough to have their own children, it is not necessarily advantageous in a genetic sense for people to live after they get to be 40 or 50 years of age. The contribution of grandparents is interesting and can be debated whether it is a good or a bad thing in regard to the influence of genes. Secondly, our genes are not everything. Genes do determine the risk of some diseases, like, let's say, Huntington's disease, which is very high penetrance, autosomal dominant. But the genetic influences on aging are not irreversible. So a person who has a family history of early death because of hyperlipidemia can live a very long life if they do the right thing about statin therapy and diet and exercise and not smoking, and so on. Another evidence of how it matters what we do is both the prevalence and incidence of Alzheimer's disease is declining. In the last 20 years, it has declined about 20%. This is despite the fact that there are more older persons. So if you correct for the presence of older persons, studies in Europe, Asia, and North America show the Alzheimer risk is declining. And this could not be because of genes. It's probably because people are living healthier lives than they were before. There's better control of heart disease and hypertension, and smoking and diet. I myself remember in college, I used to eat 2 hot dogs every day for lunch, and I can't imagine how that was possible, how I could have done that. So these factors suggest there are protective factors for various diseases that not only can influence the risk, but delay the onset of the diseases. Another fact here is there are immune mechanisms with all age-related diseases, heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer, Parkinson's. These involve the gut bacteria or the partner organisms we have on our skin and in our bodies called the microbiota, and we can change them, and they have very important influences on immunity. For most all of human history, we were hunter-gatherers, and we had a very different lifestyle than the one we have today. So the idea here is that the genes we have now were not selected by evolution because they are beneficial in the current lifestyle we have. So the main dietary problem our ancestors had for the last 100,000 years of human evolution, the main dietary problem would be not having enough to eat. The main dietary problem in North America, perhaps, is we have too much to eat. And we're not prepared by our genes for that problem. Similarly, we're not made by evolution, or perhaps our ancestors did not have the opportunity to be sedentary. If you lived 5,000 years ago and you didn't go out to get water or hunt or gather vegetables, you wouldn't live very long. Everyone was physically active. So we're not prepared for survival with physical inactivity. It's necessary to consider the effects of lifestyle choices on these 4 reserve factors I mentioned. And the other part of this, it means that young people are very well made. Older people are not prepared by evolution to live beyond 40 or 50. So it matters more about what we do. My favorite example there is, just imagine a game of American football played by men who are all 70 years of age or older. There'd be a stretcher on the field after every play, and you'd need a whole line of ambulances ready to take all the players to the hospital eventually, because obviously older people just can't do tackling and blocking, and it wouldn't be pretty. We're not prepared for what happens when we get older. So we need to be more protective. And that includes not only protecting against physical injury, like being as crazy as to play football, but also as to eat badly and not being physically active.
Oh, shit. Can't do much.
A key concept in the immune system is that it's a component of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, as well as stroke, heart disease, and cancer. And there is a balance required. There is an active inflammatory state, which is balanced by a less active state, which is called tolerance. This has been associated with aging in a new word called inflammaging, because there's such an important component of inflammation in aging. It's involved in many disorders, and we can adjust our inflammatory state through our diet. The best way to consider this is to know that the bacteria in the gut are present in everyone, and they're present in all of our ancestors going back 1 billion years. So monkeys and gorillas, primates, mice, birds, lizards, ants. Termites cannot digest wood. Termites only can eat wood because they have bacteria which is digesting the wood for them. So these bacteria, which in humans is maybe 1 to 2 kilograms of living organisms, we can't live without them. Germ-free animals have defective immune systems and other behavioral problems. So because we need to have them, we need to tolerate them. They have evolved the capacity to enhance our tolerance, because if we didn't tolerate them, the host would die and they would have no place to live. So this is called coevolution. We evolved with them and they evolved with us. So they have a great influence on our immune state, which influences all these diseases. Francis Collins has said, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So in genetics is not the only thing which influences these various conditions. Of course, genetics is important, but it works in interaction for most conditions with an interaction with environment. Only 1% of Alzheimer's are caused by genes, and about 10% of Parkinson's. And if I had a patient who was 75 who was homozygous for apolipoprotein E4, the epsilon 4 allele for apolipoprotein E, called ApoE, this is associated with a higher risk. But if I had an 80-year-old patient who had Alzheimer's disease and had E44, I could not say the disease in this case was caused by this gene or these 2 genes, because many people have those 2 genes and don't get the disease. Perhaps 40% of people who are homozygous at age 80 don't have dementia. So it is an important risk, but it's not a cause. There must be something else. And I believe the microbiota are our largest environmental exposure. So considering what it is, what can we do about the opportunity for aging? How can we enhance our fitness and our resilience? And I think it helps to conceptualize or to consider these 4 multiple reserve factors. And we know that there's a cognitive factor. So it is beneficial for the quality of aging to have more education, to have a mentally stimulating work environment, and also mentally stimulating recreational activities. Physical reserve is also important, which includes not only cardiac, but also renal function and the health of muscles and joints. And in addition, psychological and social factors, which I will discuss. Of course, these 4 factors are all interdependent. So an older person whose physical activity is encouraged will have more opportunities for cognitive stimulation, more opportunities for psychological interactions, and hopefully better social networks encouraged through physical interventions or physical environments. The concept of reserve comes from the idea of military forces which are withheld from action to serve at a later time. This is exactly what we need with aging. We need to have reserves available so when we need them. Our reserve capacities allow us to have resilient responses. One example here is, imagine an 80-year-old person who falls and breaks their hip and goes to the hospital, gets pneumonia, and dies. Hip fracture is quite common in older persons, and the risk of dying after a hip fracture is quite significant for older persons. But if the outcome is good or bad depends not only on, let's say, the nature of the fracture itself, but on the reserve capacities of that person, which could determine whether they get pneumonia in the first place, and if the pneumonia is minor or severe. Of course, it may be a particularly horrible bacteria that they acquire, but it may be that their immune system is not capable of a sufficient response, and or their BMI is so low that they don't have enough nutritional reserves to fight the infection. These reserve capacities allow us to have resilient responses to these challenges. There are behaviors that influence not only the diseases, but also our reserve capacity. So our behaviors influence how we're affected by the disease, as well as if we get the disease or not. And both of these things, both A and B here, are influenced by the multiple reserve factors. So this is particularly true about Alzheimer's disease because it takes many decades to develop. So if you have relatively more protective activities, your Alzheimer's condition may affect behavior at a later age. And because the ages are relatively late, many people may live long enough, may not live long enough to have expression of the disease. So they may have an Alzheimer process in the brain, which does not cause dementia. So our goal is both to influence the effect of the disease on the person, as well as the risk of the disease itself. And cognitive reserve is enhanced by education, but not only that, also activities at work and at home. So this is an illustration of how the 4 multiple reserves can impact both the Alzheimer's process as well as the ability of the Alzheimer process to cause cognitive impairment. Because many people have an Alzheimer process going on in the brain for 10 to 20 years before the onset of their dementia. So that many older persons can have this going on without any influence on their cognitive function. And if we can slow this down, we can perhaps prevent the development of cognitive impairment through these 4 reserve capacities. My idea about physical reserve includes all the body systems, including the gut bacteria. And there are things we can do about that which have important effects. Particularly oral health is critical because periodontitis is a risk factor for heart disease and stroke and Alzheimer. And with Japanese colleagues, we have shown that oral bacteria can increase the risk of large and small bleeding in the brain. And for some reason, oral health is often not considered. And so I discuss oral health with every patient I see, regardless of their age or what the condition or complaint might be. I guess if toothbrushes were owned by Pfizer, they'd be paying us to talk about the importance of oral health with every patient, but that's not the case, unfortunately. So this is our largest environmental exposure to gut bacteria, which is with us at all times. A sneeze is only a brief transient exposure, which of course can be important, but it's short acting. Our gut bacteria have been with us for millions of years, and they have more genes, maybe 100 times more genes than our own human genes. And they influence the brain so that the immune cells in the brain are called the microbiota. It has recently been found that their activities are influenced by bacteria in the gut. And we can influence these organisms through our diet. This can have impact on learning and memory, as well as influences on heart disease, stroke, and cancer. The routes in which gut bacteria can affect us are shown here, that can go not only to the brain, but also to the spinal cord from the gut, as well as from the mouth and nose. The nose pathway may be particularly important in Alzheimer's disease, and the gut-brain pathway from the intestines may be particularly important in Parkinson's. Psychological reserve is the ability to maintain healthy mental function and avoid depression, anxiety, and unhealthy mental states. And this, of course, is related to other activities, other reserves, such as physical reserve. Physical exercise has important beneficial effects on depression. People who are more stable have more resilience and more resistance to cognitive impairment. Depression is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. The evolutionary component here is very interesting. Randolph Ness, co-founder of the field of evolutionary medicine, wrote an important paper entitled "What Good is Feeling Bad?" illustrating the fact that the main cause of depression is not a citalopram deficiency. So people are not depressed because they have not taken an antidepressant. They may be suffering some difficulties in their emotional and physical environments, which needs to be adjusted. So the problem here is that many physicians are so busy that it takes 30 seconds to write a prescription for an antidepressant, and it might take an hour to learn about a person and to learn why they're having depression. And I think the concept of the 4 reserves can help in this context. Social reserve describes the interpersonal networks and support systems and the ability to be connected with others. So poor access to healthcare, which is just an enormous problem in this country, on isolation and loneliness, poverty, inactivity, apathy. These are all related to social factors, but they're also related to physical reserve, cognitive reserve as well, and psychological reserve. Isolation in mice makes Alzheimer model mice worse. And these are all social factors. And of course, there are things that can be done which are critical in regard to this reserve capacity. So the applications of these concepts include these various factors. I would point out here that there are things people can do. So I would propose to my patients, regardless of what they're complaining about, physical activity is important. They need to be concerned about their health. Mental activity is good for the brain and the rest of the body as well. It's good to enhance their psychological well-being and their involvement in social activities, and to have a better way to deal with stress, which can be through meditation, and also physical activity is good for that as well. And pay attention to the quality of their sleep and their diet, which I'll talk about in a second. And being careful with hazardous behaviors such as driving and toxic exposures. These are all interdependent. The microbiota can be influenced through our diet. O'Keefe in Pittsburgh showed that a period as little as 2 weeks is enough to significantly change the population of bacteria in the gut. So the reality here is, if you eat a diet with a lot of red meat, the bacteria that you enhance in the gut are relatively more inflammatory in the body, including the brain, than if you have a diet with small amounts of meat and more plants. In particular, fiber is eaten by bacteria that are enhanced by a high fiber diet, which epigenetically enhance the production of tolerance-inducing immune cells. This is just another way to say, if you eat brown rice instead of white rice, you may have a good effect on the immunity of the body, so that there is less autoimmunity, less active inflammation, which could have a beneficial effect on heart disease, stroke, arthritis, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer. I should mention that several of these recommendations have not been demonstrated by a double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized trial. But there is scientific evidence for this, and I'm not aware of any negative effects. It's not like people will have side effects from these interventions. And some of these recommendations cannot be studied because you can't have a 40, 50-year study about the influence of diet on cognitive impairment in late life, starting at the age of 20. Fiber are complex carbohydrates that we can't digest, but the bacteria can. This includes whole grains, fruit, vegetables, and legumes. So recommended items are plants, particularly legumes and whole grains, brown rice. I don't see any reason why anyone should eat white bread. Brown rice has 5 times more fiber than white rice. Chicken is better than beef or pork, and fish is probably better than chicken. A new concept here, at least new for me, is diversity. So it's good to eat good things. It's also good to eat a large and wide array of good things. I don't recommend eating red meat or refined grains, a lot of salt, a poor diversity, or low fiber foods. A 16-ounce steak has no fiber whatsoever. Sugar is not good to have excessively. So sodas are not advised of any kind. Artificial sugars have negative effects on the gut bacteria. So a plant-based, low-saturated fat diet with little meat is recommended. The Israeli historian Yuval Harari said sugar is a greater danger than gunpowder nowadays, and that McDonald's and Coke possess a far greater threat to your life than Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. And this, of course, is related to the risk of diabetes, which is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Physical activity increases blood flow and the production of growth factors and new neurons in the brain, and we can all use new neurons. It's valuable to exercise, and there is even studies that show exercise outdoors is more effective than antipsychotics for physical aggression in dementia. So exercise in nature may be particularly good. I recently read a report that patients who had heart surgery do better if they're in the hospital with a window overlooking a tree than with a window overlooking a brick wall. This is an interesting thing we should consider when talking about our patients' physical activities. Randolph Ness said that there's a problem that we can't stop our consumption of opportunities to display ourselves and get feedback in social media. And this is not really good for our psychological reserve capacity. The brain is dependent upon all the other body parts, and whatever we do which is good for the body is good for the brain. I've had patients who would consume 4 bourbons every day, and now they're 85 years old and they have a cognitive impairment. They have cognitive problems. I need to explain to them that their liver is 85 years old as well. And it may be beyond the ability of the liver to continue to be detoxifying the alcohol, and they should lower their intake. Of course, we all need to know that the most important cause of reversible cognitive impairment is drugs, either the wrong drug or too many drugs. And many older persons are taking drugs that they don't need. And there's an evolutionary component to stress, which is important to understand, that it is a developed pathway which has evolved with evolution because of its value. So stressful events will be better remembered. And people who have post-traumatic stress disorder need to understand that evolution has produced a mechanism by which these things can be remembered, because it's probably evolutionarily valuable to remember what happens during a stressful event. So it's not something that you just get over because time has passed, but you must learn to live with it, live with them. And meditation may help. as suggested by William James, the Boston psychologist, that the greatest weapon we have against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Nearing my conclusion, hazardous behaviors are important. So actually, the brain has evolved a mechanism to protect itself from trauma. But this is only true about woodpeckers, not about humans. So woodpeckers can smash their head into trees, and the brain is protected by a series of membranes. But we don't have those membranes. And chronic traumatic encephalopathy has been found in 80% of college football players. And it's a very controversial issue, but I think playing football is not good for your health or the risk of the onset of dementia. So to conclude, we need to practice personalized medicine. Francis Collins says personalized medicine is use of genetic information. And I think that's a good thing, but I don't think that is what's necessary. Personalized medicine is what every doctor should have been doing for the last several hundred years. And personalization is a key component of these multiple reserves. To make recommendations to our patients so that they can do the right thing, but so they can understand why. It's not enough just to tell them and to deliver the information of what they should do, but explain how it might influence their life now and their opportunity to enjoy aging later. There is an enormous component here because of poverty and racism. All of the protective factors are linked to poverty: low levels of education, unfavorable economic status, healthcare access, or psychological stress. There's underrepresentation of minorities in the Alzheimer workforce and underrepresentation of minority research subjects also and in clinical trials. And the rather obvious conclusion is these health inequities are all preventable. The best example here is higher levels of education are associated with increased cognitive reserve, which influences cognitive decline. And which reminds me of my own city college where I went to school. City College is the first free public institution of higher education in the United States. It's produced 10 Nobel laureates. It is a magnificently valuable, worthwhile, cost-effective intervention for society to enhance education in the community. Advanced education has beneficial effects on every health outcome. So to conclude, aging is not inevitable. And because it's not inevitable, it's an opportunity. And we must actively work to enhance these 4 reserves throughout life to maintain our resilience, enhance our resilience, and increase our chance to appreciate the opportunity of aging. Finally, considering aging as an opportunity, I looked up the word aging in the etymology dictionary. And I saw opportunity means having a favorable wind coming to port. That's where the P-O-R-T out of opportunity comes from. And I think that's quite a beautiful way to summarize the need to take advantage of all the favorable winds we have, especially those that help us to age well. And this concept of the 4 multiple reserves can help us manage our sails so that we can gather the favorable winds and use them throughout all stages to achieve meaning and happiness as we get older. And thank you very much for listening. And I am am very pleased to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Friedland. That was amazing. Gave us such hope, gave us the capacity to be able to realize we have control over how we age. We all that are in here today should take Dr. Friedland's message out to all of our communities and share what we've learned today. And I guess I know what I'm going to be doing at Thanksgiving, purchasing a book and getting that to several family members. So thank you so much. We do have a few questions and we have about
Thank you.
5 minutes. So let's see. So there's a few questions in the chat. Let's begin with that one. How do we know if our microbiota composition is healthy? Are there tests for this?
Yes, there are companies that will do an analysis, and I'm not. I don't think the evidence is clear that it's helpful to have it analyzed. Perhaps in 5 years there'll be good evidence. People will know more about what to do with this information. But I do think, regardless of what such a study would show, and I guess it's, I'm not recommending that it's necessary or advisable to do it. It's also expensive. But if you can make some alterations in your dietary habits to eat less red meat and eat more fiber, there may be beneficial effects on the gut bacteria.
So I guess the next question was, is there a specific diet that you would recommend? We just heard you talk about the fiber. And I also add a question to that about fermented foods.
Yes, it's believed that, right, thank you. Fermented foods have live bacteria, so that the best one might be yogurt. And so I would recommend eating some yogurt every day, but don't eat the sugar, don't eat the fruit yogurt, which has a lot of sugar. So if rather eat yogurt and put in your own fruit. So raisins have sugar. If you put raisins in yogurt, you'll have some amount of sweetness. If you have the fruit yogurt, you'll have a very large dose of sugar. And it's better if you have a lower intake of sugar. Kimchi has a lot of bacteria as well, but it also has a very large amount of salt. I've read about kombucha, and it's not clear that those bacteria are good for you.
Okay. All right. All right. We have another question. With social factors, have you looked at how ageism impacts aging as an opportunity? Thank you. You spoke to that. Do you want to reinforce that?
Well, it has an enormous impact, so that my tennis club does not have a age group over 50. They have opportunities for people over 50, but nothing specifically for people over 65 or over 70. And you go to many restaurants and you'll find a lot of background music, which is harder for older persons who have more auditory problems in noisy environments. And this is, I think, would be a problem of ageism. And often older persons, they lose the ability to drive, so they have less access to community resources. And of course, activities need to be adjusted to take care of this problem.
All right. I think I have another question, just one quick question. So if someone is not really engaging in any of the 4 reserves, is there, not really focusing their efforts and trying to work on those 4 reserves, is there a particular reserve that you would suggest first over the others?
Right. Well, they are all related, but as I said, it's good to have that personalized whenever possible, so that if I have a patient who used to play the piano, let's say they played as a child and they played 30, 40 years ago, but they stopped, I would recommend that they play. And I've taken a prescription pad out, even though we're not supposed to use prescription pads anymore, but I'll write down, play the piano, and I'll tell the husband, put this on the refrigerator. I wanted to play the piano every day because playing the piano is good, is a physical activity, and it's good for the brain.
Frozen.
Hello,
Yes, you're back.
am I frozen?
You were, but you're back now. So you're talking
So,
about.
I saw an 84-year-old woman who was participating in a early music festival, learning to play the viola da gamba. So by going to this, learning this instrument, it was enhancing her cognitive reserve. But also she had to go from class to class, which is enhancing her physical reserve. And she was also meeting a whole lot of people like me and other people, which is good for her social and psychological reserve. So just one thing like learning a new instrument or learning an instrument or practicing an instrument you used to play. But of course, this needs to be personalized. I wouldn't recommend somebody to play the piano if they had never played and had no interest in the piano. But you might find that some person may be very interested in languages and they always wanted to learn Italian. Well, I would encourage them to do that, which could have good influences on all the reserves. And even the microbiota, because Italian food probably has less meat than an American diet.
I know of an Italian leader that's part of the Traeger Institute is probably very happy about that. So I think on that note, we're going to go on and end this. I think we could continue for many hours to come, but we have to go on and end this. Thank you so much for sharing all that.
Thank you very much.
It's been quite a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so to our conference participants, I just wanted to let you know that 10:30,
I was like,
we are
what's that?
going to go on and have our breakout session. So
Oh,
there are
no.
so you'll want to
Actually,
go
just
back.
Becky's on a call.
Oopsie,
And I was
think
wondering
somebody
because I've got
may still have their mic on.
the Zoom on. So I was like,
Sorry.
what's that sound?
Excuse me. All right, so just let me just repeat what we just indicated is that the breakout sessions will start at 10:30 and you will be going back to the Eventry platform. We have been able to rectify the issues that we were having. So 10:30 breakout sessions begin and we'll see you then. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Dr. Friedland. It was wonderful.
Oh, I hope everybody heard me.